Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot.
Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, and how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University. Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV.
Hi, welcome to World Inkers Network. This is episode number 267. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host, on a good day. This is a good day. So we have Philip Nikolayev, and he was born in Moscow and raised in Russia and Moldova. Poet Philip Nikolayev is the son of a linguist. He grew up speaking both English and Russian and immigrated into the United States in 1990. Nikolayev earned a bachelor's and a master's at Harvard University and a PhD at Boston University. His poetry collections include Dusk Saga, Monkey Time, and which won a verse prize, and Letters from Aldenderry. In his poems, Nikolayev pairs philosophical questions with daily life, frequently combining formal and experimental approaches. In an interview with Jack Loon for The Argonist Online, Nikolayev stated, "Writing is largely spontaneous for me, and improvisation and self-surprise are important parts of it. I write in hopes that what moves or interests or surprises me may also cause a similar response in someone else, the providential reader, in Mandelstam's phrase, if you will. Often I don't know exactly where a poem, a certain kind of poem, leads me until the very end, with some luck, everything just happens to click sharply into focus." Nikolayev is one of the founding editors of Fulcrum, an annual of poetry and aesthetics, and his work has been featured in over 180 more extraordinary poems for every day. He lives in the Boston, Massachusetts area with his wife, the poet Kasia Kopovic. Thanks for joining us today. Philip, how are you today? How is life in Boston?
Hi, Dustin. So nice to see you face to face. You know, we know each other chiefly by correspondence and via texting. And it's a pleasure to be here on Parrot TV. I'm Philip Nikolayev, by the way. Nikolayev.
Okay, gotcha.
My wife's name is Kasia Kopovic.
Okay, I need to work on my pronunciations.
I don't blame you. In fact, the way you've said my name, Nikolayev, I'm quite used to it. Many people say that way, and I sometimes bother to correct them, but sometimes not. But since this is, my official interview on your channel,
Right.
Philip Nikolayev. All right. So I'm very happy to be here, and I'm glad to answer your questions.
So I'm curious, you just recently released a translation of Pushkin's work, and I'm curious about why translate in the first place, and what are some of the difficulties in translation?
Good question. Yeah. Well, poetry translation is both conceptually and in practice, a kind of a very diverse can of worms. There are all kinds of ideas about literary translation, about poetry translation specifically. The translation of fiction, of literary prose, is somehow not seen, and perhaps justifiably is not seen as problematic as the whole project of translating poetry, on which, informed and learned opinions range from the view that translation is impossible to the opinion that it's absolutely essential to cultural flourishing and intercultural interaction and so on. My own path into poetry translation has been long and somewhat indirect. So as a young man, as a young poet in Russia, writing in Russian, chiefly in Russian, I would, in my late teens and early 20s, sometimes translate poetry from English into Russian. And since I was bilingual and often worked as a translator, I was also sometimes commissioned to translate Russian poetry into English. And I mean, luckily, none of those translations have survived to this day. But those were poems by contemporary Russian poets that I translated at the time into English without, being very, very advanced yet in terms of English versification, perhaps. And then for a long time, on moving to the States and switching languages and starting to write in English. This happened around the year 1990. Actually, I came to the States on September 5th of 1990, and I eventually started writing in English, almost exclusively in English. And I decided not to translate poetry because somehow it was something that everybody expected me to do. And everybody wanted to sort of pigeonhole me as this Russian poet who translates a lot of poetry. And I would say, no, actually, I don't write in Russian and I don't translate from Russian. I'm just, I was trying to be an American poet with some success, I dare say. But then
difficult work.
Also, I'm glad that I did not do translation at the time. Of course, I would have learned much by doing it, but also there would have been all these sort of immature, premature translations around. I would have published them here and there, and I'd be perhaps ashamed of them now. In fact, I did translate some poetry by Osip Mandelstam, Russia's, in my opinion, Russia's greatest poet of the last century. And those intermediate translations that I did in my maybe early to mid 30s, I've recently found them on a backup disk, and they're neither here nor there. They're kind of weak, in my opinion. I am translating the same material now with a very different vision and confidence. So, what do I think on this? I'm on record. I have old interviews where people ask me about translation, where I say that translation is impossible, that the greatest poetry cannot be translated, that it's a kind of an impossible project. And I have not entirely become disabused of those opinions to this day, paradoxically, even though I translate a lot now. And I love translating, and I do think it's a very important activity. Ultimately, the original, a great masterpiece in its stunning and humbling quiddity, in its uniqueness, in its thisness, that's untranslatable. It's going to stay there in the original. But something is achievable by way of translation. You can create, I think, some idea of, first of all, what it says, what it means, and secondly, what it's like, what the original is like, kind of formal aura, the formal and semantic aura of the original. I believe in this notion of auras when it comes to works of art, to poetry. These I know that it's unscientific, but it's as if we perceive poems as if they had souls.
Right.
We perceive
It's a very
works
nice
of art
thought.
as if they had soul, as if they were alive. And while I recognize that you cannot prove that in a controlled lab experiment, this is how we artists interact with our material and so on. And I think some of that aura can be, with great luck and not always, not consistently. Success, there's no guarantee of success when you try to translate a masterpiece, yet to some degree this is achievable, and it's necessary to try. And I think in some cases it's very you can be very successful. There are some translations that really become organic texts, become important texts in the target language. And this is what a translator, a poetry translator that has aesthetic ambitions, aesthetic goals that are similar to mine, tries to achieve. So it's just, this is turning out to be a little bit rambling, but I think that's okay.
It's good. It works.
Very big area, and I constantly ask myself these questions, and I'm confronted sometimes with what other people think about these things. So, specifically in the context of Russian poetry, one thing that matters here is that 19th century Russian poetry, for sure, and the vast majority of 20th century Russian poetry is highly formal, by which I mean metrical and rhymed verse. And there are, different positions on how to translate formal verse into English or into another language. And because of the triumph of free verse in English versification in the 20th century and until the present day, most English language poets who are also translators, they write their own original poetry in free verse chiefly. I also do that. I have plenty of poems in free verse, but being a Russian poet, I have this, I'm steeped in poetic form. It's inevitable for Russian poets, at least of my generation and the preceding generations. I'm not sure about the younger ones. There's been a great deal of sort of cultural and literary Americanization going on in Russia, to some degree. Yet formal verse is still by far the prevalent form of Russian poetry writing to this day among today's practitioners. And it's not considered, old-fashioned and obsolete and expressing old values and incapable of expressing modernity and postmodernity and so on. In Russian, it seems to be capable of doing all those things. So when I translate my own approach, and here I'm very, very much of the Russian school of translation, my own approach is to translate, to try to not only be accurate about what the poem means, it's about its message, as it were, and the words and the argument and the rhetoric, but also retain the form of the original to the extent that it's possible, to retain the same meter and the same rhyme scheme and so on. This means that a translation is never isomorphic, or almost never isomorphic truly to the original. By that I mean an isomorphism is a one-to-one correspondence between things. So it's usually not the case that every word and every nuance of meaning in the original corresponds to some word and a similar nuance of meaning in the translation, so that you can construct an exact function that translates. If this were the case, then machine translation or Google Translate would be adequate for that purpose. But when you add the requirement that you translate in form, this adds a whole new level of difficulty to the game. And here, it's not a matter of versification as a lot of people understand it today, of sitting around and counting syllables. Do I have 10 syllables in this line? No, these things are automatic to me. I have, what musicians would say, perfect pitch. For syllables, for rhymes, for those kinds of things, I don't sit around, like consulting rhyming dictionaries or counting the syllables. I express myself freely in verse forms. And I try to take advantage of these kind of versification skills, which are, I regret to say, largely gone from most English language writing, from most English language poetry today, both in the United States and on other continents. There's more of it in the UK. I think there's still more of an interesting form in the UK. That said, I don't know that I've really followed all the trends in current poetry very, very closely. I certainly see a lot of writing among the younger poets that uses form very, very brilliantly. Since we're on it, I would like to name Blake Campbell as a particularly striking candidate in that, particularly in that department, and two Indian poets, Shushmit Panda and Shumit Chowdhury, who write very, very striking formal verse, and I think younger poets who are very, very promising in that department. I think it's very important, whatever the mainstream styles may be and the current fashions of the day. I think it's very important that poetry never lose completely these, its command of these traditional forms.
I agree. I definitely agree.
They should be retained in perpetuity, and I'm trying to do my own bit for that, in particular by translating Russian poetry. So there you have this, this very long-winded response.
It's a very long-winded question, really. It's a very long question. So, how do you feel? When you're in your own poetry? You mentioned the oral qualities. How do you interpret the oral qualities of your own poetry?
So I said aura, and you heard oral. Those are somewhat different things.
No,
but
oral. That's I know what you mean, but
an aura is a kind of shining, but in poetry,
oral,
you're right, has a kind of a phonetic. There are these phonetic auras as well, because poetry is a sound system. But the question was, I'm sorry.
When you said aura, I thought when you said aura, or were you saying oral or aural, like as in a spirit or a
aura.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I thought you said. That's what I was pretty sure. That's what you said. So how do you when you look at your own work, or as you're writing it, how do you interpret that quality in your own work?
Well, I think the more technical, the more technical aesthetic term would be synesthesia. A particular interconnection and interaction between the various layers of the text, including its visual form on the page and what it sounds like, the sound structure, the phonemic structure, and its semantics, the way meaning is expressed, the way it works rhetorically, the way, but is there an argument, or is it disrupted, or is it associative? But there are various ways in which a poem can be organized internally.
Mhm.
All these things somehow, and not to mention images and narrative, and the thought itself, what's being thought in the poem.
Mhm.
All these things are interconnected and interact somehow in poetry, and it's an ideal medium for this kind of effect more than prose, because it has these additional formal aspects.
Mhm.
So poetry is the genre that gives us, in a concentrated form, this kind of tight interlinking of the various um, aspects, the various levels of language and expression. And this is why we love it, those of us who do love it, because
Absolutely.
it's electrical. It
Mhm.
sparkles. It's electrical. And of course, it all somehow works at the level of neuroscience and so on. There are these various areas of the brain that light up and so on. I know nothing
Mhm.
about that, although I would,
It's an interesting domain.
in the long run, I would very much like to know more about that.
Yeah, me too. That's an interesting, field of knowledge that could probably be approached in different ways. I mean, to study the neuroscience of poetry and how it interacts with the brain and filtrates the neurons and things like that would be an interesting branch. It should be an entire segment of poetics.
Hmm. Do you know one thing that I've been this is a sort of a hobby of mine.
Mhm.
I've been interested in behavioral economics,
Okay.
the theories of Daniel Kahneman, um,
Hmm.
uh, who has this great book, Thinking Fast and Slow, about our two neural systems, the kind of we often think of our brains as being divided into the left and right hemispheres. So that's not a very informative model.
Right.
It seems that more informatively, there's this ancient brain, which is the kernel, that is at the center of the brain. And then it's like an onion. There are all these all these other layers added by evolution. So there is the kind of reptilian brain that has evolved over a much longer period of time and is responsible for our emotional reactions and so on. And there is the rational brain, the slow, responsible for slow thinking, rational thinking. So
Hmm.
we make our impulsive decisions very quickly, instantly. Like when I've often noticed that when you show a child a work of art, a young child, I mean, 5 or 6 years old. So they will instantly, they'll look at it and they'll say right away, I like it, or I don't like it. And they don't look at it very long. They don't study a
Hmm.
work of art the way we do. But this fast system, the fast responding system, the instinctive kind of almost, I want to say, animal, or biologically deeper system responds
Hmm.
right away. And then we can spend much more time thinking about why we like it, and maybe rationalize it or rationalize it away and decide that no, in fact, we don't like it. But those will be secondary reactions. So I think in this synesthesia, in poetry, it's often been observed, and some of the great poets have said that it's a great poem before you understand what it is, what it means. Something similar kicks in, I think, when we read poetry. It has this ability to connect with our primal nature as well as our rational nature, and this kind of dichotomy, this dualism, is a part of its beautiful synesthesia. Mm.
Absolutely. We're going to take a brief break. We'll be back with some of your own work, and we'd love to hear what translations you have to offer. So here's a song by Caborn, What's Peace? Welcome back to World Anchors Network. That was Caborn with What's Peace. Let's hear some of Philip's poetry if he's prepared. I'd love to hear what you've got.
Hey, so yeah, we started with translations, so I thought I'd
Mhm.
open with a translation as well. You
Excellent.
mentioned my Pushkin volume, so here
Mhm.
it is. Uh, the Star of Dazzling Ecstasy. That's a line in my translation from one of his poems. It talks about the future of Russia when Russia will become free. That will be the star of Dazzling, Ecstasy, Rising. And it came out just a couple of months ago from Tip Top Street, which is a Russian-run press in New York that publishes Russian poetry and fiction, and also specializes in bilingual editions. And this is one of them. It's has originals on the left, facing my translations on the right. So here is a poem by Pushkin, composed in 1822, and it was composed when he, as a young man, was in exile for his political dissidence in the city of Chisinau, or in Russian Kishinev, in Moldova, the capital of today's Moldova, which is also the place where I happen to have grown up and spent much of my childhood and adolescence in. So this has a kind of an additional resonance for me for that reason. And the poem is titled "The Captive." Deprived of my freedom, I dwell behind bars, and dank is my dungeon with locks on the doors. Outside, my sad comrade, a captive young eagle, is waving his wing as he pecks at a kill. He drops it and stares through my window, unblinking, as if he were thinking just what I am thinking, and urging me forth with his gaze and his cry, both seeming to say, "Let us flee, let us fly, for we are free birds, and it's time we took flight, to where, capped with clouds, the tall mountain looms white, to where the blue sea gazes up at the sky, where only the wind ever ventures, and I."
Wow.
So there's a sample of my translation, and it's
Excellent.
it's in the meter and rhyme scheme of the original.
Good job. I can it still has the impression of what it's describing. I mean, it's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. So where do we go from here?
Would you like to share one of your own works with us?
Sure. Yeah.
We'd love to hear it. Watching World Inkers Network. Thanks for joining us today, our viewers. So if you'd like to subscribe to our station down there, just go ahead and subscribe right now if you're watching.
Okay, so this one will be from my collection, Letters from Oldenderry, which is it was published by Salt in it's a press in England, poetry press, in 2006, and still remains my best poetry collection. Although I have some new volumes of poetry forthcoming in the hopefully near future. This one already feels a little old to me, but still has some of my favorite poems of my own in it. And this one is called The Art of Forgetting. Last night I cooked my socks in the microwave by mistake. What to do when you're so absent-minded? As well, I have frequently refrigerated my poems in the freezer to the point of having to thaw them later, and poetry is what emerges in defrosting. I have also lost to nature generations of galoshes, coats, scarves, umbrellas, even once an Egyptian skullcap, whose individual names I forget. The name of the Tsar escapes my mind, on whom was meant to be my dissertation, or was it thesis? Water, all kinds of water under the all-purpose bridge. If I've forgotten so much via absent-mindedness mostly, then how much have we forgotten as a species? One day we learn, another forget, everything, including this fact. It's possible, given enough time and effort, to forget anything, which is why we like to reminisce sometimes on those even who've decided they don't like us. We'll fight for our memories, the truth as it appeared once. But to remember something, we need to forget something, a different truth. My grandmother believed that if you dab any convenient spot on your body with iodine daily, it will help you keep your memory in old age. Head of the Marxism-Leninism chair at the Ivanova Energy Institute, where she taught philosophy and scientific atheism. She was the kindest soul, loved and spoiled me to distraction, and her blueberry cakes were, of course, the best in this world. Baptized as a child, on her retirement to a small apartment in the Crimea, she read the Bible, perestroika raging all around. Everyone wrote, thought, and talked of Stalin, 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 Beria, Stalin. She read the Bible, both the Testaments. Thus, dialectical materialism was forgotten, and an ancient faith recovered. I too would like to forget a few things, keep trying, but tend to forget instead all the wrong ones, like submitting payments by the due date, the need to tie my shoestrings, Mnemosyne, and her daughters the muses, and her grandsons the museums. Literature too is a museum, as well as Lenin's mausoleum, which is essentially a tomb. As you must of course know, I have forgotten the remote control on the bathroom sink, where my reflection in the crooked mirror distracted me with its scowl. This is Earth life, but like hailing from outer space. When my daughter was born, I spent the night with her and my wife at the hospital and went home the next day to clean the apartment. I vacuumed the floor very thoroughly, my thoughts soaring far and wide. Little did I notice that the vacuum was running in blowout mode, so the condition of the floor changed hardly at all. This still makes my wife laugh, and may indeed be worth remembering against all death. While stress, duress, and strain, the painful neck crane, and other stuff rotten, are best forgotten.
Well, it starts off a little with a little humor, and it just evolves from there into a really deep and serious poem. I love it. I love that work. Wonderful, wonderful,
Thank,
wonderful.
thank you very much, Dustin. And by the way, this is a good occasion for me to thank you for being a regular and faithful reader of my poetry, and for your appreciation of it, and also for reviewing some of my work. It's great.
Yes, I did a review of the 14 younger international poets recently.
Yeah.
I was in World Literature Today. That was just published this current edition. So if you guys are out there watching this, it's out there right now on the market. Wonderful book. I love the entire collection. Really, I can only name a few people that were in there that I named in the article, but I did love everything in the book. It was quite fascinating, beautiful. So, what would you like to say in conclusion to the viewers and to fellow writers, academics, whoever's struggling, people worldwide?
Um, Many things can be said, but I'll say this: that poetry is irreducible.
Mm.
And when I was younger, I would sometimes worry, uh, looking at the way the world is going, what's going to happen to high art, to poetry. Um, and the answer is, I don't want to say that it's clear, but it seems to me that poetry will mutate and adapt, and that it's a part of our very, like of the very essence of human nature, which has to do with our ability to adapt to things, to situations, and it will keep mutating, and it will take on new forms and speak in new voices and so forth. But this is, we all have different paths in life, and and consider ourselves responsible for all kinds of things that we care about. This is, what I care about poetry. And I say with confidence that through all the trials and tribulations and this kind of dystopian period of the last several years that has been upon us, poetry will be with us and will keep us warm and will keep our eyes sparkling and our hearts beating with optimism.
Absolutely, it's a beautiful art, and it's such a shame that so few people endeavor to look into it. But would you like to give any shout outs or thank yous to anyone at the conclusion?
Shout outs and thank yous to all my friends, poet friends and non-poet friends. Not very many, but very dear to me, my close friends. And to my readers are concentrated on Facebook, which has over the years become this immensely important self-publishing platform for me. And I feel very attached to my readers there, and a big thank you. Huge thanks to Tip Top Street and its editor Ilya Bernstein for publishing my Pushkin. I also have other work forthcoming from them. I have a collection of bilingual poems. The English title will be Fugitive Speech. That's going to come out sometime this year. In poems that have, Russian poems that have English equivalents or English translations and vice versa. I would like to thank Art and Letters in the person of Ben Mazer and Raquel Balboni, wonderful poets, for publishing 14 younger poets. I still recommend this book to people who try to figure out what's going on among the young poets today and where poetry might be.
Excellent volume, beautiful.
And to everybody who cares about my writing and about me, I'm too numerous to name. But thank you, I love you all. And to the viewers of this channel, thank you. If you're watching this, it means that you have a highly specialized, highly refined, advanced interest in poetry, beyond a doubt. And so kudos to you, and thank you for listening to me.
Well, thank you so much, Philip, for joining the program. And if you have any other people you'd like to suggest to be a guest, that would be wonderful. So we'd love to hear from them.
I would love to send you a list. Yeah, I'll think about it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
you guys out there viewing their viewership today. If you're watching, you can like, subscribe, share, comment on our station and on Facebook as well. This is World Inkers Network. And if you would like to donate, we can definitely anticipate some money, I hope, from some funding from people out there, fellow artists, friends, and supporters of our program, to paypal.me/nyparrot. If you have any questions about that, just get in touch with me on Facebook, Dustin Pickering. And if you want to be a guest on our program, we'd love to hear from you at Literary Corner at NewYorkParrot.com. Just send a headshot, bio, and a sample work so we can get an idea of your writing and your who you are as a person. And we can create a beautiful promotional set of flyers and so forth for the program. Thank you guys for viewing today. If you've missed any of the program, go back and watch it and start from the scratch, from the beginning. It's a wonderful exposition on poetry translation and Philip's own work. So thank you guys out there for watching today. Again, I hope you will subscribe to our channel. And, if you're sitting down and you're kind of confused about life and you're struggling to write, today now is a good time to get to writing. Have a great afternoon. Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer. This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, and how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University.